Welcome to Digging Deeper with Visible Learning for Social Studies, focused on transfer. This is our professional development session for February 3rd, 2021. First, let's look at our learning intentions and success criteria for the session. We are learning about the transfer phase of learning so that we can, one, identify transfer goals that align with our course curriculum. Second, we want to be able to facilitate the transfer of conceptual understandings to new contexts. And third, to utilize our transfer goals to integrate content, skills, social emotional learning, and the common good into our classrooms. So this sounds like a tall order. Let's go ahead and get started. This is really a follow-up to our October professional development session where we talked about visible learning for social studies, and we began with an understanding of the three phases of learning. So on this pyramid, our phases start here at the bottom with surface learning. This is where students gain an initial understanding of the concepts, terms, skills, facts, and key vocabulary around a particular topic. So we have at the surface level students simply coming to understand what these concepts mean, and then they begin to consolidate their understanding, but still at the surface level before going to the deep stage of learning, which is where students begin to make connections between and among these ideas that we've looked at, these concepts that we've organized at the surface level. And they make generalizations. That is, they think about broader principles that underlie the discipline that they're studying. And then finally, in the third phase, which is our focus for today, is transfer. And that's where students are able to apply the connections that they made at the deep level to new situations as they arise. You'll notice on the left what increases as students move from surface to deep to transfer. The level of independence and the level of metacognition both increase as students move from surface to deep to transfer. At the core of visible learning is concept-based teaching and learning. So I've created two graphics here to distinguish, I think, from event-based, which is a kind of a form of teaching history. In geography, it might be place-based teaching versus concept-based social studies. What's the difference in these two ways of teaching? If you notice in the event-based teaching, it's really these series of things that happen along a timeline. Again, if it were geography, it might be simply looking at a series of places across the globe. And that's not to suggest that what we're talking about in concept-based teaching doesn't involve chronology or that we're trying to throw out timelines. That's not the case at all. But what it is to suggest is that there's a difference between simply covering events or covering physical places in the world and tying those events or those places to some core concepts. Concepts meaning these abstract ideas. And so we're using these concrete events to draw connections and conclusions about abstract ideas and principles. And so we take the events as we're covering them and we use case studies, we use examples, we use ideas, and we pull those together in order to understand key concepts. And that really is the difference. And if you think about, a traditional textbook organization, for example, might simply move you from one event or one historical period to another. And if we do that, and again, it's not wrong to sequence things or to teach things in chronology. We're not suggesting a full-scale shift necessarily to thematic teaching. We're simply to cover the events one after another without discussing what the relationship is between and among those events and what are the bigger, more abstract principles that we're supposed to draw out of our study of those events is the difference between event-based and concept-based social studies. So as we dig in here today, I want us to think about this question. Can teachers be replaced? And you'll notice here I have the teacher versus the computer apps. We know, as we've spent a lot of time in virtual learning, and both teachers and students have learned a whole new range of tools and apps that they can use for virtual learning. Do we need the teacher anymore? Or can the student simply log into Khan Academy or Crash Course? Can they read articles from World Book Encyclopedia or Newsela? Can they learn via module-based learning like Apex Learning? What is it that the teacher is able to do that Khan Academy and Crash Course and Newsela and World Book and Apex aren't going to do? I would submit that one of the things that we do as teachers is we help students make the connections to deeper learning and transfer. Khan Academy and Crash Course and Newsela and Apex and World Book do a pretty decent job at teaching surface level understandings. They may even from time to time help students with some deeper level connections and making comparisons across time and place. But what I'm going to submit to you is that our primary role as the teacher is not to address the surface level information, because there are tools that can do that for students. And we can utilize those tools as teachers to do that. But they're not going to replace us as teachers if our end goal is to transfer our surface understanding of these concepts to new contexts. And that facilitation of the transfer that takes place is really, it should be the primary role of the teacher. And so that influences not just education policy, but that helps us to think about how we use our time in the classroom. And when we're in a true blended learning environment, what is it that we have students do on the computer, and what is it that we need the direct instruction and the feedback and the conversation from teacher to students and from students to students in order to build that deeper understanding and that transfer. Why visible learning and why now? Again, this is a repeat from our October session. I suggested 4 reasons why it's important, I think, to look at visible learning and why it is timely. First of all, it helps with embedding relevance into our courses. It helps us to be able to prioritize and streamline our content when we know, especially as we're in virtual remote learning, that we can't, quote, cover it all. It allows us to do a case study approach. That is, again, to examine particular concepts and then to look at case studies because we know we can't cover everything. And then finally, it allows us to have that collaboration among us as professionals, with your colleagues, collaboration with students in order to draw these conclusions about the relevance of history to our daily lives. These were the headlines that I pulled up from October 16th. And again, these went back a few months, and we were thinking about and discussing all of the ways in which students need to have some underlying knowledge and skills in order to be able to effectively understand the headlines and everything that is associated with these headlines and the articles themselves. Everything from understanding federalism to impeachment to economics to civil rights movements, and of course to global pandemics. And these seem almost a little outdated by now. Here we are in February. Now we're talking about a second impeachment. We're in the aftermath of the Capitol insurrection. We're in the aftermath of the 2020 election. We're beginning now to roll out vaccines, the COVID-19 virus. And so How do we think about all of these issues that we may not have even seen coming in October? And again, visible learning is going to help us, and concept-based teaching is going to help us think about what are the underlying skills and content that we need students to understand in order to be able to deal with these kinds of issues in the contemporary world. And we can't always predict. Nobody probably predicted a GameStop sharing on the open market, right? But can we provide some conceptual understandings that will help us even when it comes to unforeseen issues that may come up in our world today? So we're going to go to our first breakout session. And this is in a Jamboard, and you will be organized into 8 groups. And your group is going to examine one of the 8 headlines from those slides. And I want you to discuss in your breakouts what are the key conceptual understandings. And by that, we mean the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions or the values that students need to understand in order to grasp the event or issue presented in this headline. And in the Jamboard, if you've never used Jamboard before, it has a sticky note feature where you can simply list ideas and then you can move those sticky notes around to organize your conceptual understandings for your particular headline. So we will go to Breakout now.